Okay, so when looking at Photoshop, we'll just kind of go over the basic view when you get started. So this is the view when you have all these palettes that are here, and your palettes can be moved around and changed. The idea when you're working in Photoshop is to minimize the amount of space that you're actually using for palettes and stuff like that. So for example, libraries we can get rid of, probably the adjustment layers to start we can get rid of. So let me show you how to move some of these palettes around. So the first thing is the toolbar that's over here, right? So it's a very long toolbar. If you want to change that, you can hit this little double arrow and it gives you the stacked one, which I actually prefer because, again, it takes up less space. Any palette you can pull out like this. And if I want to get rid of it, I can just hit X. And if you did that by mistake and you're like, oh, where did I put that? Right? You just go to Window and you can pull any of the palettes back up, which is right here. So I'm going to pull this out. You can also, if I control click on these groups, I can close tab group, right? So I close that whole thing. So the next thing that you need to look at is if you are, right, so these are double, right? So there's two of these, history and actions. Well, I just want to close that whole entire thing. Right, so let's go ahead and close that, close tab group, and I'm actually going to go ahead and close most of these. Now, looking at this, right, you have your layers, channels, and paths, which is probably the basic that you need, which is fine. If I want to collapse this even further, I can move this over. I can hit this little arrow key. You can see it moves it over. I can expand it out or not. So again, I now have these little icons. And as soon as you start getting familiar with Photoshop, those icons become more recognizable. If for whatever reason you had something else like, let's say, color up here, and you didn't want it docked right here, but you wanted it docked over on the left, which you can do. So let's go ahead and take this color palette. I'm going to drag it over, and you can see this blue bar appears, and there it is. And let's move this in with it as well. Now again, I don't want it so big because you can see that really minimizes my space. But if I hit that little double arrow, there, now we got a nice working space. Right? Okay, so that's just a little bit about the palettes. I'm going to expand this out so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Now, every Photoshop file, if you open up an image, right, there's a background to it. Let me show you the difference between, so this is an image that was opened up, versus if I create a new document, right, and my background now is white. And as I add new layers, these new layers are transparent. So that's what this little checkered box means. Now, if you wanted to take this background and not have it be not be solid white, as you create a new document, so that's File, New, or Command N. In here you can change your background content. Black, white, background color, transparent. So now your backgrounds, right, so you see the difference. The background is transparent, this one is solid white. So let's say you have this image here and you want to move it. Well, when it comes in, it's locked as a background layer. So if we double click on that, and we're going to call it water. Now it's not a locked layer and I can move it around. So let's take a look at some of the tools so you can kind of see what they are. We have this Move tool. So the Move tool is basically for just what it says, moving stuff around. If I had another image, or if I had, right, I had this. So you can see I now have two layers. This Move tool will move this around. When I'm on the water layer, it'll move the water layer around. Okay, so just that's what the Move tool does. Inside of the selection tool, incidentally, any tool that has this arrow next to it, if you click and hold, you actually get more tool options. So you have these marquee tools, and we'll go over them, but just to show you, they make what are called selections. All right. This is another set of selection tools. These are your lasso tools. Okay, and again, we'll go over these, but just showing you what they are. We'll also go over the magic wand is another selection tool. Here's your crop tool, right? We have perspective and regular. The regular crop tool, if you make a selection out of it, you can see it's cropped where my selection was. And again, we'll go over that in more detail. Eyedropper, right? Your eyedropper tool selects colors, which is kind of cool. So as I click through this image, you can see down here, it's selecting those colors. These tools here, all the Band-Aid patch, these three tools here will go into greater detail. Don't worry about those at the moment. You do have your brush tool. You have a brush or pencil. The pencil tool is really not so great. The brush tool is for drawing, and again, we'll get in a little bit more detail later on. The eraser tool, right, erases. We're going to show you much better ways to do that coming in the semester. We have our gradient tool, which again we'll touch a little bit later on. Your blur and smudge, not so great of a tool necessarily, but we'll do that when we get to more painting and drawing. You have your text tool. The only other two functions that are really important to understand is this hand tool. And the hand tool is important, so if I'm zoomed in, right, so there's two ways you can zoom in. You can do Command plus or Command minus. So let's say I'm really zoomed in and you want to go back out, I can actually do Command 0 and that'll bring me back out to fit the screen. So let's say you are zoomed in. Using the hand tool, you can see I can pan around. You can also do that as a shortcut if you hold down spacebar, and I can move around. Right? So again, Command 0 brings us back out. You can also get the magnifying glass, which is the zoom tool, and you can see the default is plus, and so I can drag and do it, or I can just kind of click. If I want to go minus, hold down the Option key, and I minus out. Right? And again, Command 0 brings us back out, right? So Command plus, Command minus. And that's kind of the basic overview of Photoshop using just kind of real basic tools and palettes.